Well, uh, I, Marian, Bernice, Watson, Barney, was born to goodly parents. Arthur P. Wilson and Mary Elizabeth Young Wilson. In Lander, Wyoming, on the 10th of February, 1929. Daddy worked at a Indian mission, where he taught school, and we lived there till I was 3 years old, and then we came down to Grandma and Grandpa Young's. We stayed there for a while, and then we finally found a place of our own, and we went to school in Mighton, Irene and I. Bonnie was born up on the bench in Roosevelt, August 18th, 1934. And Mother was really sick when she had Bonnie, and she went through a lot. We then moved down to on Duchesne River, and Daddy farmed, and Irene helped Daddy with the hay, and I helped Mother with the fences, and we all done the garden. And Irene always had something to do, and when we went to school, our two uncles run the bus, Uncle Marian and Uncle Willard West, and Marian Young. And Uncle Bill used to let me shift gears in the bus, and that was fun. I thought that was really something. And we lived there till I finished the 5th grade in Mighton, and then we went, we came to Provo and stayed with Daddy's cousin Agnes Stywalder, and then we went to Salt Lake, and we lived in a motel for quite a while, and finally we got, Irene and Mama cleaned the motels to pay our rent, and then we got an apartment in Salt Lake on 7th South, and we went to school. I can't remember the name of the school, but Irene went to Bryant. I can remember that. She was in the junior high, and I can't remember the name of my school, but it wasn't too far from home, so I walked. Then we went to Pocatello, and Daddy worked there. We went with some good friends. They went to Stan and Winnie Jones, and we stayed there, I don't know, not very long. And we came back to Provo, and there was a house for sale by Lizzie Grant's on 5th North and 15th West, and Mother bought it, and they weren't through with Pocatello yet. Mother and Bonnie went back to Pocatello when we bought the house, and Irene and I stayed. And then we started to school in Provo, and I was in Dixon, and Irene was in Provo High, and I met Carol Harding, and she was my very best friend, and we done a lot together. We walked to school together and from school every day. As I said, we lived on 15th West and 5th North, and that was a long ways to walk every day, but all three of us did that. And, I played in the orchestra at Dixon, played the violin, and but Carol and I done everything together. And from there I went to Provo High and graduated from Provo High, and then I met Bud. We double dated when we were going with other people, and the fellow I was going with, I wouldn't go with him because he was engaged, and he was mad because I wouldn't go with him. And so Bud said, well, I'll go. And he said, well, she won't go with me. I don't think she'll go with you. And Bud called me, and I went with him. That was in September. I got my engagement ring for Christmas, and Bud's name was Eugene Barney, and we got married the 11th of June in '49, and we waited a while to have Judy. Bud was working out to Geneva at the time, and he was on different shifts each week, and she just didn't know when to sleep and when not to, so he finally quit there and went for the telephone company, and that's where he retired from, is the telephone company. And after a while, we lived in Mother's and Daddy's basement till for a while when Judy was a baby. Then we lived on First South and in Provo, and then we bought this home. Irene, how old's Lynn?
Yeah.
How old is he?
He was born the 22nd of July.
54.
54.
Yeah.
54. We moved here where I am now at 113 North Geneva Road in Provo. And why I can ask Irene how old Lynn was, because he was a tiny baby, just born, and we moved here in August, and he was born in July, so he was a tiny baby. And Irene helped me move my things, and we bought the house for $50. And it only was, the whole thing was only $5,000. And we paid $50 a month till we got it paid for. Then we added on 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms and a family room. And Bud and Daddy and Glenn done most of it. And we really appreciated what?
Talk about Bud and Daddy and their different ideas of when things were done.
Huh?
Talk about Bud and Daddy and their different ideas of when things were done.
Daddy had put
Shim.
water lines in, and they'd pass each other. So after Daddy and Mother went home at night, Bud went down under the house and changed that. And, but we was really thankful that Daddy and Glenn would help us.
But
And,
one more thing. Daddy would go ahead and saw a board, and if it was too short, he'd put a shim in it, so it'd be long enough. Remember?
Yeah.
Bud
So-
went back and did all those things over again.
And so we raised our family here, and we had good neighbors, and then our kids went clear through school. Judy, Lynn, Barney, Darius, and Kenneth, Eugene, Barney, and Catherine, Mary Catherine, Barney. We'll leave it at that. And we didn't have any problems with our kids while they were going to school. I mean, Kathy was a little rowdy, but that was okay. And I didn't work while we were married.
Okay, wait a minute. Okay. While your kids were in school, you were PTA president.
Oh, yes.
How many times?
I was PTA president twice, and I had 25 years in PTA, so I had a life membership. And I did do that, and I worked in the church as primary president and Relief Society president, and on the state board, and I enjoyed every bit of it.
And
I tended Jenny while I was on the school board, PTA board for the city, and I'd take her with me to the meetings, and she was always good, so we didn't have any problem there.
And while you were in PTA president, you went to a workshop in Wyoming about adult education.
Oh, yes. I did work at the school at night, doing ceramics on Monday night, which is family night, we decided. And the BYU asked me to go with two gentlemen, I can't remember their names, to Wyoming to introduce the night recreation at school. So I did, and while we were there, we had the privilege, I don't know whether it's a privilege or not, but we went to the Wyoming State Prison, and I didn't like that at all. There was a young boy on the second floor that just kept his eyes on me, and I just felt like that's just terrible that he's in this place, and I just thought then I'll never go in another prison to look at it. So, but
so you came home and started the ceramics, started the adult recreation in the schools. You're the one who did all that.
Yeah, we started the adult education, and I didn't know too much about ceramics, but I quickly learned, and from that, they done some other things too in the evening at school, so that square dancing, Bud and I were in that, and Jerry and Dawn was in it. Jerry's Bud's sister, and her husband Don, and their last name was Thompson, and we had a good time doing that too. And our school just was ideal for the kids and the grown-ups. we really had good turnout at school for them. And so we done that, and then in 1979, I had a friend, Barbara Wardle, that asked if I'd come and do ceramics at UVC. It was Technical College at the time. Now it's the University of Utah. Utah Valley University. And I worked there for 12 years doing crafts. And the kids did get credit for it. And we had night classes also, so I'd go at night also. And we done silversmithing, making rings and ceramics and pottery and stained glass and weaving. And well, every time we heard of something new, we bounced on it and done it. And the kids did get credit for it. So I worked there till 1991, and then our big boss over the student center wanted me to stay, and they were changing the craft center into a hall, and he wanted me to stay, and he says, well, find a little nook to put you in. And I said, Tom, I just don't want to stay. He says, well, I'll let you go with Bud whenever you want to go on the truck. And Bud started driving truck in 59, so he drove truck. He had 3 jobs, one at the telephone company and one at the hospital and driving trucks. And he worked at all 3 of them and was really well thought of. And he was a wonderful husband and a very good father to our kids. And it's been hard without him. He passed away the 3rd of August, 19. It's be 5 years this year. So, but it was 09 when he passed away. But
Marian, could I interrupt one more thing? Will you talk about Bud working on the water line up in the canyon
yes.
and getting hit?
Yeah, we're going together. Bud was working on the green water line up in the canyon, and he was working here in Provo making the lines. And the wind was blowing, and a crane had one up in the air to swing onto a truck, and he was there trying to help him get it on, and the wind blew, and his head come between the 2 pipes, and he got a fractured skull, real bad one. He bled from his ears and all over, and but I went to the hospital because I had double dated with him. I went to the hospital to see him, and his tear duct and his saliva duct switched. So when he was eating, his eye had run, and that bothered him a lot. And the one side of his face was paralyzed, but you couldn't tell it only when he was looking in a mirror. And I didn't know that till years later, and I went in the bathroom to get a comb or something, and he was shaving, and I said, your face doesn't look like that, Bud. And here, all these years, he thought that people could tell that was paralyzed, but you couldn't tell. And we loved our kids, and he supported them in things, and we tried to support them in the things that they were going to. And while Judy worked at the hospital ever since she was 14, and she become a registered nurse and went to the BYU and got her degree, and she worked with the babies in the hospital, and she loved it. But she got arthritis real bad, and she didn't dare pick up the babies, so she had to retire. And she hated that because she loved her job. And Kent, he went to the UVU when it was trade tech and got his degree in drafting. And they've even asked him a couple of times to come and teach there, but his income would be a lot lower than what it is, and so we just couldn't do that. And then, well, first of all, Judy had Jenny, Genevieve, Catherine Duraeus, and Daniel Alexander Duraeus, and Kent had Ryan, Barney, and then the twins, Brett and Brandon, Barney, and then Devin, the youngest. And they've all been on missions, but Ryan, and he got kind of cheated out of his, and but he's been to the temple and got sealed to his wife now, and we're so thankful because he is a good boy. And Kathy, her name's Mary Catherine Barney, so she had Chelsea, and then, she had Chelsea, and then we waited a while, and then she had Dusty. I think they were 17 months apart, and then then she had Luke with Bill Young, and Colton. Colton has graduated from high school last year, so he's been home with his mother for the years, and I'm real close to my grandkids. I love them all, and they're good kids.
Not to mention their friends.
Huh?
Not to mention their friends. Let me just say here that there have been times when we went to Los Angeles, for instance, to Huntington Beach and stayed, and went to Los Angeles Temple, and we walked in, and here came this sister missionary, Grandma Barney. We went up to Wyoming to the handcart place, and here came one of her former bishops. There's no place you can go around here that people don't know who Marian is. The special ed director in Provo, one time I was talking to him, we were working on some problems, and I don't know how it came up. I said, well, you know my sister, Marian Barney. Marian's your sister? Everybody knows Marian.
Well, we've lived here a long time, and I've been active in the city, and
you have been,
and in school, and so I do have a lot of friends, and I don't know, I just feel so blessed with my children and my two sisters and their families, and we love them all. We've been a real close-knit family. What's yours is mine, and I think we have done a good job, all of us, and we're thankful for our membership in the LDS Church and for the things that it teaches. We ask Thee to bless our families, Father, and let them, guide them through the things that they're wanting to do. I'm grateful for the many blessings that I've had, and I'm alone now, but I do have friends and family that comes to see me all the time, and I'm so thankful for that. And there's a friend of mine, Margaret Rasmussen, that brings me dinner every night, and bless her heart, she just wants me to eat. She's afraid I won't eat good, so she brings me dinner, and I really appreciate her. And I've had good friends, Sylvia Taylor and Denny Ward, and all those that are in the church in my ward. And I'm grateful for my two sisters, and because we've always been close and will always be close. And I want to say that we always seen that each other was well, and if it happened to one of us, it happened to all of us. And I ask this, Father, and to watch over us, and especially today while we're doing this, and that everybody will be able to go home safely. And I want to thank our Heavenly Father again for my life.
Okay. You know the little stove on the patio? The little gas stove? That's the kind of stove, that's why that's there. That's the kind of stove Marian had in the basement. So,
yeah,
that's a little memory thing for me. Oh, and when she lived in Provo, she lived in the sheriff's department. And they were really good to you, weren't they?
Yeah.
They really were. Okay.
Irene?
I can think of a lot of things about Marian that are really fun. We got 1 year for Christmas, and I think she was about 5. I was about 8. We got big paper dolls. They were probably 10 or 12 inches tall, and they were in books. We had to punch them out, and so Daddy glued the paper dolls on to some real fine, real thin board, and cut them out for us, so we wouldn't mess the dolls up or tear them or something. And Mama went over to the hardware store or someplace and got wallpaper books. Each year they got new books with all the new wallpapers in. So she got one of the old ones, and we made doll clothes out of those for our paper dolls. And we had those until I guess probably until we left the Uinta Basin. And but I know that they were given to Billy and Dee Dee at that time. And, but she loved those dolls, and she could make the cutest clothes out of and we had to make our paste out of flour paste. And so she was always pasting ruffles on them or something. She just had a lot of fun with those dolls. And while we were still in Ethiopia, Wyoming, I got a little cook stove, a little miniature cook stove for Christmas one year. And it had a little tiny frying pan and a little tiny kettle. And she loved that stove. That was her fun thing to do, was to play with that stove. And when we left out there, we couldn't take it. We just had a small trailer.
Remember the trailer?
And so we couldn't take any of our toys. We couldn't take anything. And I was 15 years old, so it didn't bother me that I couldn't take my toys, because I've outgrown most of them anyway. I got to take my books. But Marian felt so bad about that stove that she said, let's hide it. So we hid it between the wall and the grain bin in the granary. And we went out there, it must have been 4 or 5 years later, that we went out, and our stove was gone, wasn't it, Marian?
Yeah.
And about playing the violin. Let me tell you about this violin. Daddy decided that he was going to learn to be a musician. So he sent in the mail and got a mandolin, and over at the second-hand store, he got this violin and a banjo. Well, when I was in the 6th grade, our music teacher was giving violin lessons, so I took the violin, and I never did learn to play it. All I could make it do was squeak. I mean, it squeaked. So Marian got the violin, and you cannot believe how fast she learned the violin and how good she got on it. It was wonderful. She could play that violin, and somehow, I don't know if it was Bud's accordion or if they got it after they were married or what, but Bud and his uncles would play guitar, and she picked that accordion up and play right with them. Just never had a lesson or anything.
Let me add to that. John Hilgendorf was the orchestra director, and in Provo we used to have what was called a Lyceum series, and they would bring in famous people to the tabernacle, and we would have concerts and whatever. So John Hilgendorf was a friend of Isaac Stern. At that time, no, not Isaac Stern, Heifetz.
Yeah.
Joshua Heifetz. So they were like the top names. Isaac Stern and Heifetz were the top names in violin and gave concerts all over. And Heifetz came to Provo for the Lyceum, and he asked Mr. Hilgendorf for a matinee orchestra, and he said, pick out your best students and so that they can back me up. Well, Marian had only played not even a year, I think, at that time, had you? And Marian was picked for that orchestra. And then, because he had that kind of ear, Mr. Heifetz auditioned some of the people in the orchestra. And he said he would sponsor Marian because she was so talented. And Mother just thought he was kind of a dirty old man, right? But
And how old were you when that happened?
she was in the 8th grade.
8th grade?
And, okay, one more thing that I think amazing. When she was in the 1st grade, is it the 1st grade? Yeah. This little boy would hold her down and kiss her, and the floors were oiled instead of orange, so it would get her dresses dirty and everything. And when they got back, anyway, some way, Aunt Maggie and Uncle Frank, she started to stutter with that. She was anxious. And Aunt Maggie and Uncle Frank thought that was funny, and so they'd do things to make her stutter. And Mother said, well, she's just too nervous, that's the problem. So she took her out of school for a year and kept her home and cured her stutter.
Yeah, and that guy called me about 3 years ago. His wife had died out in Mighton, and he wanted to come and see me, and I told him no.
Oh, thank you.
And his name was Floyd Cox.
Yeah.
That's a small town, huh?
Yeah. But I have no interest in any other man, I'll tell you. I had too good a one to begin with.
And when she was about 4 or 5, how old were you when you got your arm broken up, falling off the horse?
Grandpa was plowing, and he put me on the horse. He had to hold the plow, and I fell off the horse and broke my arm and broke every bone in it. And what was
And you had a long sleeve on, and you said, Grandpa, my arm's gone.
Yeah, and Uncle Sherman took me to the doctor, and that many years ago, she set my arm, and I've had no problem with it ever since.
And the doctor was Dr. Miles?
Yeah.
She
And her
drove all
hospital
over, huh?
was in her home.
Yeah. Drove all over, and she's the one that didn't get there for me to be born.
Yeah.
Okay, and when Marian was 3, we had moved down from Wyoming, and Grandpa Young bought coffee in cans, and Marian, Aunt Loretta, my mom's baby sister, was sick all of her life. She was born with a hole in her heart, and at that time they didn't do anything with it. They just let her be an invalid. And sometimes she could get up and play with us, and sometimes she couldn't. But she was down in the long cellar in bed. In the summer, Grandma and Grandpa had these 2 big, long cellars built right back into the hill. And in the summer, the girls all moved their beds down into one. And because it was nice to sleep down there, and they had room then. But Marian gathered a bunch of pretty little rocks and put them in one of these cans, and she started down the hill to take these to Aunt Loretta, and she slipped, and she threw her hand back, and she cut her hip just a half moon,
that big.
in the fleshy part of her hip, where she landed on that can. And then, so they took her over to Roosevelt to the hospital to get sewed up and taken care of. And it was the UBIC, which is a big celebration out there. It's the
Uinta
Basin
Basin
Industrial
Industrial.
Convention. And
Yeah.
the doctor had gone up in the mountains to get some shrubs for her house, to put around her house. And so they had to take her over to the UBIC, which was in Fort Duchesne. And the
As
doctor
opposed to
that was
Duchesne.
over the Indians,
Fort
over
Duchesne
out
is
there,
between Vernal and Roosevelt.
sewed her up. But he didn't clean it out good, and he was drunk to boot. Daddy was mad he could have killed him. And so she got infection in it. So they had to, for 20 minutes out of every hour, they had to put hot salt packs on her hip, and she had to lay on her stomach. And Mama's cousin, Jim Sweat, came over, and they were putting the packs on her, and he said, "She needs a puppy to play with." And Mama said, "Okay." And he said, I've got new pups down there. I'll bring her one. "Come on, sis." And he got me up on the horse with him, and we went down to his place, and we looked at the pups. He had 5 pups. One of them was a female, but she was the cutest one of all. So I wanted her, and he said, "Your dad and your Uncle Sherman are not going to like you having bringing a female dog over there." And I cried, so he said, "Okay, we'll take it over, and then we'll come back and get one of the others." So we got over there, and Marian fell in love with her too, and we named her Old Tippy. They let us keep her. They named her Old Tippy. And Marian would lay there and pet that dog, that little puppy, while she was getting her hot packs on. And we had that dog when we left the Uinta Basin. We still had her. She was the best stock dog that ever was. The horses would come across the river and get into our wheat field or the alfalfa field, and she'd get up there and she'd chase them back, and going down the bank. One time she didn't lay down quick enough after she bit its heel, and she got kicked in the head, so she had a scar like this in her head. And then, but boy, I'm telling you, nobody touched one of us girls while she was around. And one time, Toot Adams was up there, and he grabbed back of my hair like this. She grabbed the back of his neck. And boy, nobody messed with us. And we'd go to town or over to Grandma's or someplace, and if one of us stayed at Grandma's or Aunt Revera's or someplace, old Tip would get up in that car, and she'd look until somebody finally told her where we were and that it was okay. And it was just like she knew what they were saying.
One other thing I forgot to mention is I have the nickname of Chick. and all my nephews and nieces on my mother's side call me Aunt Chick. And
And your aunts and uncles and cousins.
yeah, everybody on mother's and daddy's side call me that. And one day, I didn't know how come I got that name, and Billy couldn't believe it. She says, "Well, my dad said you were just tiny walking around and your diaper fell down." And Daddy says, "Oh, my little chick." And she said, Uncle Bill said that was it. She was Chick. And when I was teaching out to UVU, well, Cliff called, Bonnie's Cliff. And he says, "Is Aunt Chick there?" And my boss said, "Someone's asking for Chick." And I said, "That's me." So I answered the phone. And so after that, they knew who my grandkids were and nieces and nephews called. So I've been everywhere with that name. And on But's side, they called me Aunt Marian. And it was really, really hard right at first. But now I'm used to it. But I still love my kids to call me Aunt Chick.
When they lived at the mission. And the mission was a residential school for Shoshone and Arapaho children. It was Episcopalian, and they would come there and stay. They stayed all year round, didn't they?
Oh, yeah.
And
they had the boys' building for all the boys, and they had 4 units for the girls. And the younger girls lived in 2 of the units, and the older girls in the other 2. At the boys' building, Daddy was also a disciplinarian at the boys' building, and several nights a week, I don't know how many, but he would, the high school age boys were up top and the younger ones down. And he'd say, "Okay, it's time for medicine," and they'd say, "All ready." And he'd try to give them their medicine, and they'd say, "All ready." And he had a terrible time giving those kids their medicine, those older boys. He was over the older boys. And but they had to have cod liver oil every morning. And they did not like cod liver oil.
Yeah.
that was vitamin A and D, by the way. It was very good. That was a really good thing. Remember Buddy and Alan one time found the bottle, and they loved it. And they also found a dozen eggs. And they went out and back, and they were throwing eggs and cod liver oil at each other. Can you remember that? You can't imagine how stinky they were.
Yeah.
Anyway, Marian learned to swim, and she was kind of the mascot. Everybody just loved this little baby, and there was a hot spring not very far away, and she just took off and learned to swim like nothing. And Mother said that she made her swimming pool out of a pair of Daddy's wool socks. And she cut holes in them and then put straps on them, and so there was her little swimming pool, a swimming suit, sorry. And one time, Mother couldn't find her, and everybody was looking, and there was a pool somewhere on the mission that was sooty and ashy, right?
No, it was in our backyard.
Oh, okay.
Our house had caught on fire, and they had washed all of this into this trench, and we couldn't find Marian any place. She was down in the trench swimming.
Swimming away.
She was just little.
She was little enough, when Mother told me, she said, she was little enough to fit in a sock for a swimming suit. Okay, tell us about when you were the person who selected the entertainment for the 4th of July for Provo.
Oh, I was going to mention that and I forgot. I've been also doing things for the city. On the 4th of July, we used to have the wards of the church donate things to sell at the bazaar on the 4th of July. And we had to have entertainment too. So I got Eleanor Barney Warburton, and her family to come up, and they entertained at the 4th of July. And it was very good. And then
it was bluegrass.
At Christmas time, I was on the parade committee for 4 years, and I had a friend that graduated with me that had a buggy and a horse, so I asked him, Jack, if he'd consider doing the head of the parade,
Grand Marshal.
Huh?
The Grand Marshal.
Yeah, the Grand Marshal. And what we did was, he said he would, so what we did was select a little kid that was Make-A-Wish. Every year we had one of them. And one year it was kind of chilly, so they asked me to make a cape, a red cape for her. So I did. And they used that for all the time. But we had a real good parade at Christmas time, because we found people that would do things, and a lot of people won't go out of their way to get other people to involved. But Jack's buggy was a Amish buggy, so that was special too. And one time we had a little girl, and her mother and dad were divorced, and they came and they were arguing, so she didn't get to be the Grand Marshal. She had to be at the end because they were arguing so bad, and we felt real bad about that. But she was glad that she could be in the parade, so that was nice. So, and I've worked on the high school reunion too for years, and we had our 60th, but I didn't get to go to that because I had a more important thing. Scott and Shanna had their open house, and I wouldn't have missed that for anything. So, and then Jack passed away, and he was the one that got everything started, but we had good times. But I wasn't about to miss Scott and Shanna's reception for a school reunion, so I'm glad I could go to that and enjoyed it.
Even if your sister got you lost.
Huh?
Even if your sister got you lost.
Yeah.
Going to her own son's house.
Well, we made it later.
And then when Kathy was born, she got in the car. Bud had gone to Denver to bring Bonnie's furniture.
Bonnie.
Yeah.
And he had a truck full of furniture, and he was on his way back, but Marian, her water broke. So she came up to the house and honked. And it was in the middle of the night. And I got up and got dressed and went to the hospital with her. And we were in the hospital for probably 3 hours or 4. And here came Bud. He had parked the truck full of furniture out in the parking lot, and he got there in time for Kathy to get here.
Well, and Russell Newbold went with him.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Russell.
Russell slept in the back of the truck with the furniture while Bud was in the hospital with me. So I was glad he made it, though.
I was glad they came to move
the
me.
fathers didn't go in with the mother, so we done fine.
So he got to walk the floor.
Oh, there's another thing about her courtship. After the first date, except when Bud was out driving a truck, he saw her every night until they were married. And when he drove a truck, this truck, then he would come back and he would come and drive by if it was in the middle of the night or whatever, and blast his
Yeah.
muffler
Oh, the
thing.
brake, yeah.
Oh,
And then he'd
tell
go.
him about your porphyria.
Hmm?
Tell him about your porphyria.
Oh, well, I was 25, and I'd had, in between Judy and Kent, I had 3 miscarriages, and so I had a miscarriage, and my doctor had to go to a seminar in Reno, Nevada, and so I was in the hospital, and every time they gave me a shot, I hurt worse, and I told the nurse that, and so she, the doctor released me, and he didn't know me, of course, and he released me and thought I was hooked on pain pills, and that's why. So I went home, and I just kept getting sicker and sicker, and finally Bud called Winnie Jones, and he says, Winnie, there's something wrong with her. And so she came down, and she called the doctor, and she said, there's something wrong with Marian because she's hurting really, really bad. And he said, no, she just wants the pills. And she says, no, that isn't right. She says, if you don't do something about it, I'm calling another doctor. And so he put me back in the hospital. And my doctor came home, and his wife said, Marian's in the hospital and not good. And he said, I didn't even take off my coat. And he came right to the hospital, and he had me all ready for surgery, exploratory, on the gurney and everything. And I said, Dr. Smith, can I have a blessing? And he said, you bet. So we got
August. August Lewis and his son-in-law.
Yeah, Ross and August Lewis to Ross Risky, and they gave me a blessing, and he went down to the lab to see what was going on, if he could, and Dr. Ruver had been to the Mayo Clinic about 6 weeks before that, and they had just found out about porphyria. And it's when the oxygen doesn't get into your blood, then you lose your red cells. And he had a little name card with what to do on it. And Dr. Smith come back and he says, we're not going to operate. And I says, oh, please do, please do. And he says, no, it wouldn't do any good. And he said, I'm calling in another doctor. And he called Dr. Rupert, and Dr. Rupert come. And he just had a card on the back of it. He had written what to do for it. And so he called, they give me hormones to stop it, and he called the San Francisco and the Mayo Clinic both to see what to do, and they said as bad as mine was, that I'd probably be in the hospital for 3 months, and I didn't like that at all. And so they gave me the hormones, and I finally went home. And so I had attacks of it off and on for quite a few years. But they finally, I had the flu, I thought, once, and it was the porphyria. And I was in the hospital, and Dr. Rupert and Dr. Smith both come in to see me, and I said, Dr. Smith, what did you put in that IV? And he says, oh, I put a little bit of vodka in it. Did it make you feel better? And I said, well, whatever it is, it helped. And so Smokey Allen Tisdale had a hernia operation at the Veterans Hospital, and the doctors in the University of Utah Hospital and the Veterans Hospital, they work both places. And Smokey mentioned that he might have porphyria. So this doctor called me and wanted me to come up to the University of Utah and have some tests. So I did. And he says, we just found out that the IV at 50%, I think it was, will stop the attack. And I says, I'm one to prove that. I says, because it stopped. I thought I had the flu and it stopped the pain. So you ache everywhere you got a blood vessel. Bonnie and Irene both have it, but theirs is different than mine, and I guess there's quite a few different ones, right? And so I've had a siege, maybe over 2 or 3 years, and so Dr. Rupert told me that I would get better as I got older, because you don't need as much oxygen in your blood as you do. And knock on wood, I haven't had one for years, so I'm fine.
And was Grandpa's the same as yours?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No,
His?
it's
No,
from
his was
Daddy.
different.
Yeah.
Oh, you said Grandpa.
Grandpa.
I thought it said Grandma, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I don't know.
I don't either.
We just know that we got it from him.
Well, I've got ALA and latent, and Lynn's got ALA, and Alan has latent. And both the girls have got latent. Both my girls.
Well,
I'm not supposed to be able to give it to my girls, but they've disproved that now. But at that time they didn't.
they know so much more about it, and I used to think it was very, very rare. If you were from South Africa, in the Dutch area, you probably had it. King George V, was he the one with the American Revolution? He had it. That's why he was crazy. Yeah,
Well, Marian
that's
was,
true. That's where the line goes.
Yeah.
Marian
Yeah,
was
it
the
is.
first one in the state to have the hormone treatment.
Well,
They had to send it from Denver.
people were dying on the operating
Yeah.
table because they couldn't
they
have the anesthetic.
Yeah.
And so I can't have anesthetic, only gas is all I can have. And for pain, I have to have Demerol, and that's all I can have. The
And
last case that I had was from medication. A doctor gave me a medication that went against it, so, and that's the last one I've had, thank goodness.
and so she didn't have anything with caffeine or chocolate. She had her teeth pulled without anything, including her wisdom teeth.
And one
Not
time,
fair.
I had my knee up like this, and the doctor was pulling the tooth, and he says, "Are you all right?" And I says, "Yeah, but hurry." But you do what you have to do.
Okay, while we were still down on the river, I got a book, Heidi, for Christmas, and I loved that book. But we had 2 big cottonwood trees, and somehow they had gotten a hammock, and they put it between these 2 trees. And I'd take, when we didn't have to be working or something, I'd take Marian out we'd get in that hammock and I'd read Heidi to her. And then when Barney got old enough, I read Heidi to her. But we were always in the hammock in the summer.
We also had a old car body in the backyard on the river.
Squirrel.
And
A Model A.
yeah, and we played in it. That was our dollhouse and our playhouse. So it was fun to have that too.
And one time, somebody, the beds used to have rails on them that were L frames, like this. And that was one place that they could put the bed frames and they'd be out of the way and they could see them and everything, which is important in our family, to be able to see something. So I remember where it is. Anyway, and one time Marian came running out of the house and somebody had switched, instead of going long ways, they had switched one of those and it got her right there. Can you remember? Right there. Woo! Talk about a
one
black
time
eye.
we were bringing the cows from the pasture, and one of the steers just kept going off into the hayfield, and Marian got a stick and went after him. And she popped him with that stick, and he kicked her.
Right in the mouth.
Yeah,
Just, what a mess.
and Mother and Daddy were gone. Yep. Another thing that has always struck me is 2-room houses. They abounded in our history. Our house on the farm was a 2-room house. Grandma's was a 2-room until they added on to it. Uncle Louie and Aunt Nonda's was always a 2-room. And Wealthy and Uncle Marian's was a 2-room. When we moved to Salt Lake, when we were in the basement, it was really 2 rooms. It was a long room and then that other one, right?
And then when we moved back to Provo.
And when the little house was 2 rooms.